So we'll keep the technical theme going with somebody that you might well know as well. He's been around the industry for quite some time. It's Jeremy from DNV, Principal Consultant, Clean Energy Centre. So Jeremy's going to speak to us about dispatchable energy and viability in the near future, which is I think quite prevalent to what we're speaking about. For those of you who don't know Jeremy, he's been in the industry for quite some time. Extensive experience across the world again, like so many people. And in his previous role with Schneider, I like the phrase in your bio where you influenced technical heads and commercial leaders. So I might have to pick your brains on what exactly that means over lunch. But join me in welcoming Jeremy.
Very good morning to everyone here in the room. I think it's been a very interesting 2 days. I'm very glad to be able to be here with you all. I'm very glad to be able to hear some of the other experts in the field who have presented and have had some discussions. And I think the one key thing that I think we're all in alignment is where the industry, especially in storage and PV, is headed to. I think this is very exciting. I think that's why so many of you I see here in this room today trying to understand a little bit more what's happening. I'm not the most experienced, I would say, still learning. Energy storage is still very new. We're still understanding as we go along, very much with new industries, and very similar, I think, in PV when it started out 5 to 10 years ago in a very big way. So, topic today is on dispatchable solar energy storage in the near future in the region, I would say, okay? A little bit about DNVGL. Many people might know us in various forms. We've been in some of the other companies that you might be familiar with in GH, where we have been very strong in wind, KEMA, in high voltage equipment testing supply, DNV itself from the maritime industry. So now we have merged with GL a couple of years ago to form DNVGL. We are a 150-year-old company based around the world. We have a fairly large team, and I think I'm specifically in one area, which is in the energy side, so which is about 2,500 individuals. We are the number one in terms of independent renewable advisory. So we have, I think, in the space of solar and wind, the biggest in terms of advisory experience globally, which makes us, I would say a lot of it has been in US, in Europe. In Asia, we are growing the presence and experience. China's a very large market, so it's a tough market to enter, as many of you who are international businesses trying to go in will understand. But we are doing a lot of good work now with the teams in China, okay? So a little bit of what we're going to go through today, where DNVGL looks at storage, how we look at it, some of the global trends, which I think I will look through very quickly, is I think many of you already have presented a little bit previously. Some of the applications on the value chain, and then a little bit of APAC market, and also some of the projects that we have been working on in the region. So, where do DNVGL see in terms of storage? These are a couple of points that I think are where we are looking in storage. Energy storage is definitely not as simple as PV. It's not as straightforward. I think the reason being is that it can provide multiple services, which is not something which we've seen on the PV side. So it brings in a very different level of complexity into it. We do see a lot, as we have mentioned previously in the other presentations as well already. Cost reduction, regulatory framework drivers into new markets are really important. can't overstate that. The other part that is something that may not be as apparent is actually validating system controls on systems, really key to make it work well, and the right technology fit. I think that's something that when the market's new, it may not be so apparent in understanding what would be the best. As well as on the financial side, long-term offtake contracts required to make it bankable. I think when you look at projects, at the end of the day, if you're looking for international investments or people to fund it, then you really need to look at whether it's bankable, and that's one of the things that we are seeing, that how to do that and how to make that happen. Okay. So a little bit of how we work and where we work in. So we can see on the left, we're working a lot with developers, operators, owners, with manufacturers and investors. These three groups actually are the core to our business. So we do certification work with manufacturers, benchmarking, understanding what to, in terms of whether it's in modules, inverters, battery storage systems. So we actually have GridStore, which is actually a technical code of practice that we have come up with, that we share openly with the industry to be able to help increase the knowledge. And this has been done not just ourselves, it's with partners in the industry who are also facing the same challenges and where we see that needs to be grown. Developers and operators, we work as OEs or IEs for lenders as well. We work throughout the supply chain in terms of the project process, either in wind and solar, now in energy storage, all the way to the end of the asset operations. Okay. So global trends, what do we see? If you look at 10 years ago where solar is, you see similar trends to where we are today in energy storage. It's a new market now, it's about 2 gigawatts total globally, and that's a very small fraction of where solar is today now. Similar 10 years ago, I still remember in 2008, 2009, the global market was 4 gigawatts, 5 gigawatts. Now we're talking about 68, 70 plus gigawatts, I think closing out this year or even more. So it's a huge increase, and I think the same key drivers you would see: technology, cost declining. So these are the things that we see pushing the proliferation of energy storage. Solar and wind are also two big key drivers. Why? With these two growing up, what does it do? Challenges on the network. Wind in this region, in Australia, South Australia is having huge nightmares now, trying to stabilize the network with huge integration of wind, with solar coming on as well. So if you have not read the news, Elon Musk is going down there and trying to find a solution. I don't think it's a once off. I think there's more. I don't think that anybody would be able to give you a perfect number of where it is today, and I think for storage, it's new, and you need to look at it in context, in regions, in different markets, and the type of technology. So always take whatever you see with a pinch of salt. In terms of battery prices, it's something to be aware of, whether you are an investor or developer. It is never going to be the same everywhere, and understanding what the prices are for, whether it's cells, packs, modules, racks, containerized solution, the numbers are not going to be totally equal. Okay. So resiliency in terms of electric power systems, to be able to make it, to make assets secure, I think the network operators would see this as a really important function and value. Point 5, stack applications, stack values. I think this is something, I'm glad I'm not the only one who has mentioned this. In the other earlier presentations, other people have also mentioned this. A battery itself is not just selling power. It can provide so many other potential services, which is not unlocked yet. I think it's not just the technology, it's understanding the regulatory framework and the network operators understanding that itself, because before that, they are the ones who are actually managing all this. And now when you're actually diversifying this service to other players, it becomes a little bit more complex, and people take time to be able to figure out how they're going to manage all this. So that's a very important part. Point 6 on regulatory requirements and financial incentives. I already mentioned this before. It's going to be quite important and how things are changing. Income opportunities. I think when you have, as linked to point 5, once you have stack services, there's a lot of opportunity to unlock increase in opportunities in being paid for the services that you're providing. So this is something would, I think, really increase the market exponentially. Once that is being understood clearly in terms of operating with regulators, I think this is something we're going to see really push off. And lastly, I think emotional appeal. Thanks to Tesla, thanks to the company, and thanks to how they are actually providing energy storage to the end consumer, to households. I think this makes people, he's really banking on how people look at energy storage, and being green is motivating people, incentivizing people. So I don't think it's going to be apparent to all markets. In Asia, maybe only Japan is going to be moving in that direction very quickly. The rest will take a bit of time. Australia also, I think, is possible. But the rest of the markets, I think, are not there at the moment yet. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I will quickly move on. So these two graphs here, I think, give you an idea of where energy storage from the technology part is going to head towards. We hope that this will be something that they will achieve. I think nobody knows. Nobody knows exactly, but I think it's going to just be going up, and the question is how fast that will be. And if solar, the history of solar has anything to take away from, it will always exceed it. The question is by how much. So that's something that has always, all the analyst forecasts since the beginning, I think since 2008, where things are really increasing from Europe, all the forecasts have always been exceeded. So I think energy storage could very well go in the same way. The question is as well technology, so which one will that be? We will see. The one on the battery module cost on the right, going down at a really quick pace. So the number you see there, 400 euros per kilowatt hour, and system cost, I think, would be a ballpark. And it depends on the type of technology in terms of what it is and where it's placed. So it always has to be understood in context, and I think the key takeaway is to understand it will start to go down very quickly once markets start to move. So I won't go too much on this slide, because you see that how the drop in pricing is going down over the last few years, and I think continue to drop. I think one of the things that we need to take away is that the increase in the deployment of solar, the increase in deployment of storage will fuel itself. So you'll see quite a large exponential curve that we've seen also in the renewable solar space as well, even wind. At this point, a lot of the projects have been in the US, coming up from the US. The question would be, how do we see that happen in Asia? So I think in the near term, Japan is a market that's going to be moving quite fast. Australia, as over the last 2 years with the boom in solar, I think energy storage will come very quickly as well. So we can watch in interest to see how that will be. Okay. So this is what I think for those of you who want to go deeper a little bit in terms of the stack services and what it can provide in the different areas of the whole entire generation to consumption in this chain. Energy storage can play a part in nearly every single segment, whether it's in the high voltage transmission line, medium voltage distribution network, in buildings, and even in rooftops where we see this as a possibility in terms of the different sizes. In terms of the type of services, I think most of it would be in the transmission as well as the medium voltage side to be able to balance the network and provide grid support services, ancillary services. And I think this will be something we will probably see in the large scale solar utility scale segment to be able to see these services provided. So this slide will be giving you a clear understanding of who are the key players in each of the different segments, whether from the utilities, IPPs on the top, and DSOs, going down to system integrators, okay, in terms of this section, who are the large OEMs, inverter suppliers, and then battery manufacturers. So where they will play in each specific space and their influence. So by no means comprehensive, but I think good to understand where the market and where the different groups are working in each space. Yeah? Going back to this slide, which tells you who the PPA is, off-taker, and understanding where the value of the different multiple revenue streams and services that can be provided. You know, I think we are only touching on the surface, where if you're looking at only one and try to make your financial model work, it's gonna probably be hard and expensive. But when you're looking at multiple revenue streams, whether it's time of use, energy arbitrage, peak shaving, ancillary services, these are so many other possible revenue streams that can be used and make the financial model work. The key thing is understanding how to be able to work with regulators to be paid for these services, and I think that's the big question mark that all of us have here today in the new markets. Okay. So for the utilities, where do they see the value? These are the few points in terms of what they could see in terms of T&D upgrade deferral. You know, when you have big plants, you want to upgrade, it's costly. With energy storage, I would say it helps prevent that from being done, and you still be able to provide the same services. Ancillary service, frequency regulation, voltage support. This is something we've seen for some of the projects here, even in the Philippines, where a lot of renewables are integrated in some of the areas and receiving challenges on the network because of these. And I think energy storage is an excellent way to be able to address these issues. Instability in the grid. Many people, especially utilities, some of the utilities in the region are very concerned about ramp rate, because they said solar is not stable. It's very intermittent, and we can't afford that on the grid. And so we said that, well, it's normal, but you know, storage can do that. And I think with the inverter technology that we have today, a lot of that can be overcome. So understanding also with the utilities of what can be done and what can't be done, I think is very important. And then yes, of course, peak shaving, to have it flexible, transferring what's store it in the day and then use it at night. Okay. So I won't go too much into this. I think you do understand the application. These are two areas in terms of examples in the US where we have energy storage being used in the day and then providing energy shifting towards the evening so as to prevent the huge peaks. Okay. So what I want to look now is about the technology of batteries. It is good to understand what they would be used in which areas. So the type of technologies would be able to fit well in the area of application that you're using. So pump storage, hydro, that's right on top where you have really long hours, all the way down to we're talking about frequency regulation where you need power, and lithium ion does very well on that. And in between you have a few other different types of technologies where flow, redox flow, lead acid, even sodium sulfur would be something that you can consider in your project for storage. I think when you're considering the type of battery, I think there's always different aspects that you need to consider, not just on the use, but also safety aspects. If you're using bankability, experience of the technology in terms of support in the region or in your project where it's placed, super crucial and critical to make it bankable for, I think, 20, 25 years. So understanding all these things really important, which I think we haven't seen people really fully understanding that. I would say lithium ion is a fairly new technology compared to even say flow batteries, which have been around for a very long time. The only problem is that it's very hard to reduce the price of flow batteries to make it as price competitive as say lithium ion. But it's a very good technology nonetheless that I think we've seen for long storage applications. I always think that it's important to consider the use and the total life cycle of your project. So energy storage itself, the technology shouldn't be the main consideration in terms of deciding it. Okay? One of the things that we see very often is we try to help manage the risk customers have in choosing the right technology, and I think that with every technology there will always be risk, whether it's high, medium, low risk. We try to help customers mitigate that, and with lithium ion being the largest technology that is available now in the market, we also see a lot of challenges in it. So we want to help customers educate them to understand what the risks are. So this is something to consider. You know, there are risks in terms of fires and thermal runaways do happen on occasion. So this is something to be really concerned about. I don't think it's something to not worry. But then again, understanding the risk helps you better manage it and how to mitigate it. Okay. So how do you manage that? Making sure that it's cool enough, the temperature, not having it put in a containment where you will have temperatures far exceeding it, the type of use as well. Most manufacturers now have a limit in terms of their warranties. Anything above 25 degrees, they start to say, okay, maybe it's not going to be out of warranty. So this is very challenging. Okay? Obviously, if you are in cold countries, then you have also a minimum temperature range that you can't go off. There's ventilation, off-gassing, which can cause, you wouldn't want to work in an environment where you have all this. So there are many things that you need to put in place, I think, to mitigate these risks. Often people underestimate that. They just say, okay, look at the capex, look at the cost. But these are safety issues. compliance issues to the environment. So things to also be concerned with. I mentioned before, we've been working with various partners in the industry looking at grid store as a recommended practice. It's free, it's really to help industry learn what's good out there, not to make the same mistakes, follow a set of procedures, practices, and to just bring the whole entire industry up into a level where it's not making the same mistakes again and again. So this is something would recommend to use. So really on the whole entire selecting the right technology, selecting the right technology partners in storage, in conversion system, on the safety aspect, on operations, on the performance, as well as the whole life cycle. Because if you're adding multi-millions of dollars worth of investment, you want to make sure that whatever is designed for is going to be able to accomplish at the end. If not, you'll never make your financial IRRs which you modeled it for. Okay? So looking at the market itself, here's a very quick overview, one slide on where solar is. I put into 3 different segments. Developing markets, China, India. These are 2 huge giants. I kind of think they stand alone on itself. Very complex, different segments in terms of regulations and states. So they need to be considered in its own context. Very large, but you see in terms of the number of megawatts of storage added into it, still fairly low. You look at other markets, for example, in Japan, South Korea, and Australia, I would say that it's reached gigawatt size, multi-gigawatts, but you also do see more energy storage being nearly comparable to what you see in China, India. So the question is why? Anybody would want to have a guess? Manufacturing, regulatory framework. For solar and PV, you have manufacturers in China. You have manufacturers in Japan as well who are doing a lot of battery storage. However, China is a little bit complex. It's so wide and it's not being incentivized. So a lot of it's used for other applications as well. So you're starting to see it move, but I think it's going to start to be really a lot more in the near term. Maybe more interesting for us in the nearer region, Thailand, Philippines itself. Philippines already has a fairly large project, 10 megawatt hour battery storage. Here, Philippines, Thailand is still looking. They are having some regulatory frameworks to be done with some of the utilities. So we see that moving in the right direction. So I think the question now will be is just a matter of time in terms of how we see that take off. Okay. So here are some of the key market drivers and barriers to implementing solar and storage. General market drivers on the left side, and then the barriers. So quite a few, and I think it depends really on individual markets. You have to take it into context. I think over the last 2 days, even in solar, you understand that some markets have evolved in an opposite way. Vietnam, Philippines, even Thailand. So you can't make assumptions on every market to be going to evolve in the same pattern. Okay. So looking at projects that we've some of the projects that we've been involved in, which could be interesting. So this particular project on RAM rate control and curtailment in Japan, in the North Island of Hokkaido, far north, a lot of wind, a lot of solar coming online there. So this was to be able to validate irradiation sources from this solar farm to be able to look at on energy storage to prevent curtailment. Okay. So, so this slide has basically what you see is on the left side. The red lines you cannot see is without a battery. So the power fluctuations without battery. On the blue is with battery. So basically it helps reduce the intermittency on solar, which on the right side you see this blue curve, which basically is the battery state of charge over these 4 sample days and how that helps smoothen out the intermittency and power fluctuations. Okay. Another project in Hokkaido. This is really a really large battery storage for wind on a network. There are 14 wind farms, total about 600 plus megawatts, and it's causing some instability in the network, and the developers looking to be able to help mitigate the challenges on the network. So we're looking with this investor and owner to find and validate technical due diligence on battery technology to be able to understand what the risks are and if it's being able to be used based on the design. Okay. So bringing us back closer to the Philippines, we have a project that we've worked on with this owner over the last couple of years to look at the feasibility study on this island microgrid network where we have diesel, we have PV, looking to put in PV and energy storage. So it's an interesting project. We've done some analysis to be able to help them meet some minimum renewable energy generation output over the next 15 years. Basically, so we had to help them with selecting the sites. So what we did was there are 4 different proposed sites that we could use, and to analyze these 4 sites, what will be the energy generated through solar at what specific size, then look at also the total life cycle cost for each of these 4 sites, and then help decide which will bring them the best return on investment. Okay. So last slide on the key takeaways. So I think these 4 points will I think be the key takeaways. Understanding what the government regulatory framework policies are to facilitate energy storage, based on the local grid codes, based on rates and tariff structures that will help facilitate that. Energy storage system cost reduction. I cannot stress enough that it's not just on the price of the battery packs alone, but it's the entire cost of the modules, the racks, the containerization. And I say this mainly on the utility scale size projects. It's different when you're doing this on the mainland. It's different this from doing it on a far offshore island. The logistics has to play a part. As rightly mentioned by William, in the Pacific Islands, you have challenges about the physical challenges that makes the decision on type of technology being used there. So I think that's also true for this region. So that's something to be concerned about. Third point on control systems, it's really important that the individual components itself are fairly work well on its own, but making everything work well together is a big challenge. And making everything operate accordingly to what the network and to be able to optimize it is extremely challenging. And that is something we've seen that can actually make or break a system in terms of meeting its financial targets. And lastly, looking at affordable finance and bankability, and also I think the financial institutions locally to be able to be comfortable with it. It's not that it cannot be bankable. I think it takes time. It's educating customers from the financial institutions what they need to be comfortable with. So I hope this has been an interesting time for you. That comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions. I know Jonathan covered a huge amount of items there, but if there's anybody that wants to zone in on any specific area of it for Jonathan while we have him. No, we're all looking forward to lunch. John, I'll just give you a quick question to while he's talking. Jonathan, do you not want to talk to us? You just want to talk to him. That's okay. Just very quick, I love your analogy about duck hunting. I hadn't heard that before. You know, we've all heard about the duck curve, but duck hunting was very, very enjoyable. Just a quick one. We have a session later on EVs and mobility, but from your view, you know, in the near term, based on what you're talking about, and in regards to near-term storage, EVs hasn't had the potential uptake that people thought it would. This kind of rapid development now in batteries, how do you see that potentially following on into the EV world?
I think energy storage on the EV side, I'm no means an expert on the EV side. What I do see, I give an example from Singapore. I think they've been looking at EV for a couple of years already and looking at how to deploy that. I think Thailand has also got some government initiatives to explore that, and Japan, obviously Korea as well. These two markets are large. It will, I think, be faster, I would say, in some markets than others. A lot of it has to do with regulatory framework, government incentives and support. I won't say that it is specific to what the government agenda is, and I think that is really key to be able to see what's being deployed. And I think obviously cost itself will play a large part, but you know, timing and its specifics for each individual market cannot be understated. So for example, I say Singapore should not have an issue with that. They've got enough funds and support. It's perfect for a place to do it, but I think the government itself has been very slow to commit to EVs. But that's my view as a Singaporean. I think there are other countries and markets which are a lot more forward in terms of setting it up, pushing for it, and committing to it. So, yeah. I'm not sure if that helps you.
Any last question for Jonathan? And just one final one that I had. You went through in great detail the risks, and you highlighted some of the risks of battery storage.
Yep.
One that we get asked quite a lot, and again, it's just probably a talking conversation topic more than anything. It's the end of life of battery storage. You know, so when actually it's the kind of the unspoken part of this whole industry at the moment, that everybody's kind of saying we'll worry about that at some stage. But you know, are you guys looking at something in that space, or what's your thought of that?
It's certainly something which we are very well, I would say concern is, I think, a word, not just for us, but also for owners, asset owners. It's important to understand the application first, and I speak on lithium-ion because it's the largest technology that's being used very often today. And the key thing to understand is that for lithium-ion, if you're going to be using it very often and not, which is what it's applied for, it will degrade over time. The number of cycles that you use is really important, and the temperature itself. So whatever the battery manufacturer has stated, take that with a pinch of salt, because there's a lot of fine print that goes behind there. Be concerned about that. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. So you use things according to what is made and specified for. Often, in the real world, people don't comply to that, and that causes problems. So I'm saying the battery manufacturers are trying to make products which follow a certain number of cycles that they're validated for. But if the end user does it more than what's required, then you're going to see problems. So they're doing what the best they can, I think, so designing it properly, maintaining it properly, ensuring that the batteries are not operated in a way which exceeds the specification limits. I think that's really important. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you answered my question, but it's okay. I'm joking. Yeah, Willem.
Thank you. I think it's not completely unspoken of, because what we and also other companies do is develop something like an augmentation plan. That means you try to find out, with the work together with the battery manufacturer, what the degradation curve would be. End of life of a cell is defined by going down to maybe 60% of its capacity. It's not dead. You still can use it. But what happens is over time your capacity, of course, goes down. So if you know when about that's going to be happening, then you can go into your system, add more storage to go up to the level where you've been at the beginning, so that you get that ripple curve over time. If you consider that, you can after the defined lifetime and still use the capacity. So if you work out the proper plan out of that, then you can actually work with the information from the manufacturer. At the moment, of course, we know that most of these things are assumptions, because the technologies which are there today are not alive for the past 10 years. They're there for maybe 2 years or maybe less. But getting all the information in and making a plan out of that is much more healthy than not talk about it. So there are plans of that. Does that answer your question?
No, it's just it's something that I'm very passionate about as well. So it's just an element that comes up in conversation every so often. Another comment.
Maybe related to your question. Does DNVGL look at what happens after end of life at recycling at all?
Customers have asked that question to us, and we have also obviously looked at it. I think it's market specific, not market specific, but in the sense that some customers in certain markets really ask that question a lot because they're concerned with the environment, concerned with what happens after that, how it's going to be disposed of. Some markets don't. So I think that's a question where you see in more mature markets where customers are concerned about that. So I think they say, okay, at the end of, let's say, you're looking at 20 years and you're going to change the batteries 3 times, 4 times. What happens then? How it's going to be disposed of? So these are things that some customers do ask, and the cost of disposing these batteries is something that they've also asked, what they are, what these numbers are. At this moment, to be honest, I think people are trying to put some numbers to it. There are some rough numbers, but I don't think that they are numbers that define an industry standard. It's very contextual to project because it's so new. So it's, I would say, something that needs to be looked into the contract with the suppliers itself and what they are willing to commit to. It is not, industry benchmark, it's going to be X amount. No. So in an Asian market which is emerging, that number could be very different from a mature market where they know it much better, they have thought it through a little bit better. So that's really different. I think where DNVGL looks at is being able to say whether this is reasonable or not, this is in context, it doesn't make sense. So that's where we come in to be able to help investors look at it. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Just before we break for lunch, we'll continue the technical discussions and case studies after the break. But Coco just reminded me again of the barcode scanners barcodes on the back of your your delegation tags. I just tried to use it with Viber, so that worked. And Coco was saying that a couple of the other scan apps as well that are working. So it's actually just up to date of all the photos and information of the conference. So very, very cool, very nice little feature. So yeah, looking forward to the break and some further discussions. I think we're back at 2 p.m. So you have a good long break to catch up with some emails and continue the discussions over lunch. So see you all back at 2 p.m. sharp.